Catching up in the studio with a guy called Edward Zia, former military man. He's been out of the military for the better part of the last 20 years. I want to find out what he's doing these days. Edward, how does a young Melbourne boy make this transition, one into the army, and from the army then go into the Federal Police, and then from the Federal Police out into the bold world of this modern world of ours that keeps evolving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, to become, I suppose, a promoter of influencers, the young men and women who seem to fill social media these days with their messaging, with their stories, and with some of their products. So, where did it start for you?
Well, it all started with me one day at high school being rather impressed by a military recruiter that come to our school.
Yep.
And I was instantly signed up. A young, attractive corporal came to our school and told us how great the army was and all these roles.
And you believed him?
I'm like, it's like, where do I sign up? Get me out of here. I was in a bit of a rough environment.
Yep.
And that was my meal ticket out of there, and I just leapt on it as quickly as I could.
What did your family make of this?
They were okay to good about it at the start, but they went very dark on it later on.
Now, is it because of their background? Mum and Dad were from Persia?
Yep, from Persia. Partly...
And they had to flee for their own safety, I would have said?
Yeah, my dad in particular. So my dad in particular was in that scenario. And also too, I think they didn't like the danger, which I turned out to be correct on, that I was putting myself in. So I think they just felt uncomfortable.
Okay.
I think part of them were like...
So the young bravado appealed to you.
Absolutely.
Dad and Mum, of course, with their worldly experience, would have gone, he has no idea what he's stepping into.
Absolutely. It was the bravado, but also my life wasn't working out too well.
Yeah.
And it was the instant opportunity to, start a new life and get reborn again.
And it's a young Muslim boy
Yes.
making that transition
Absolutely.
into being as Australian as he could be.
Totally. And that's
Yeah.
exactly... I was already well into that, right?
Okay.
I was already well
Okay.
into that transformation.
Yep.
But I joined the Australian Army as a Muslim.
Okay.
As a Muslim, and
Okay.
that was very interesting.
And we're talking 20 years ago,
20
which
years
is
ago.
actually more than 20 years ago, but it was a very different time in the military, I dare say too.
It's a very different time, but I'm not sure if it's that different. I speak to a lot of young soldiers today.
Yep.
And it actually sounds identical now to what it was then.
So the same challenges for them
Same
that
deal.
faced you.
Same deal. I think nothing's
So how do you
changed.
make the leap from starting in the military and ending up in the Australian Federal Police?
Well, where it all started...
Or is that a natural road?
Well, for me, because of my heritage,
Yeah.
right, and I was always on their radar, right?
Uh-huh.
So from the moment I joined the army,
Okay.
they were
Potential recruit.
that was straight into me. So when
Okay.
I originally joined, and I was going through the interview selection process, they were straight onto my Islamic background.
So were they looking at you as an undercover officer?
From day one, it turned out.
Day one.
From day one.
Okay.
I didn't realise what happened at the time, but in hindsight, I could see how I was early being picked for that.
Okay.
And so what it was, so I was still in the army, but I was seconded to the Australian Federal Police
Yep.
as part of federal drug enforcement, working in the Middle Eastern Islamic community, which happens to this day.
So you would have known all the movers and shakers in the community, the people that were making their ill-gotten gains behind the scenes.
A couple of them, yeah. Knew a couple of them.
And you got into trouble?
I didn't actually get into trouble. I never got into trouble in that regard.
No.
Right, never got into trouble in that regard. I was always fairly straight-laced.
Yep.
Right, I never really got
But
into
you did get hurt, did you not?
Absolutely. So as a result of, once I did it,
We're talking about a sting that went wrong?
Yeah, so undercover drug work is very dangerous, as you can imagine, and had a bad sting where I got very badly injured that almost killed me. I got hit over the head with a baseball bat, and that was the end of me.
Yeah. End of you as an undercover operative for the Australian Federal Police?
It was the end of me, almost full stop. I was unconscious, I was in a coma for weeks.
Wow.
And I was in bad shape.
So who got you back together? Who put you back together and gave you the confidence to go forward?
I was at an Air Force hospital in Victoria. So I was there for quite a few weeks, I think about 3 weeks.
Yep.
And they were absolutely wonderful. So, as I sort of regained consciousness and got my senses together, they were very good at helping me rehabilitate. However, I had enough trouble putting a sentence together My days in military and or policing were tragically over. I loved it, by the way, and but no, I was way too
Okay,
young to go back.
so your military and your federal police days are numbered. Where do you go to from there?
Well, I decided to actually go back into university, which I've also been looking at.
Re-educate yourself.
Re-education, and I ended up going to a wonderful uni, which is still around today and very successful, Swinburne University of Technology in Hawthorne.
And what were you doing in Swinburne?
A Bachelor of Applied Science in Chemistry.
Okay. With a view to?
Well, I just liked it and I did it. And as part of that, I was very lucky to get a top job with a company called Henkel, which is a top military supplier. So I was very lucky because of my military experience and my education, and also my sales abilities, which I know I had, but I did. I was very lucky.
Which you fine-tuned in the federal police.
Totally.
Go figure. Who would have imagined that?
And I wound up working for Henkel, which is a massive German company, and I worked a lot with military as a military supplier. The military was incredible. So I was albeit I had some rough times, I absolutely fell on my feet and got some great opportunities.
So what are you doing with yourself these days?
These days, with my wonderful wife, run a global business, helping people become master persuaders and influencers.
Okay, so all those things you learnt, one in your early days in the military, then in the federal police, of course undercover, and then in your days at Swinburne, you got to polish what you'd learnt. And what is the biggest challenge for young men and women today?
I think one of the biggest challenges is knowing how to get their message right and also having the confidence to stick to what they're doing.
So many young men and women, we criticise them these days, they don't have the focus, they don't have the ability to bear down as we used to. That's the so-called latest feedback. Is it fair or is that an unfair call?
I think
is that an observation that's way off the mark, or is there something to it?
I think it's completely unfair. I think people today, they have a lot of different challenges compared to people of our age. I mean, housing costs more, property costs more, food costs more, wages aren't the same. I think young people have it way harder today than we did in our generation, and I'm one of the people. Education today is nowhere near as what it was good 20 years ago.
Let me run something past you. 40, 50 years ago, most people were growing up and were of the opinion that they had a career coming up. They were hoping for a career. Today, I don't think you can sit back and think you're going to have a career. You think of maybe 10, 20, 30 careers that will make up for that one that lasted 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
That's the modern world we're seeing. Social media, is it a big driver of new ideas? Is it a big driver for young men and women to jump on board and challenge themselves and see what they can come up with?
Absolutely. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. That's my platform of choice, LinkedIn, owned by Microsoft. And you get amazing ideas and technology on there that brings us all
a huge global network, 600 million potential customers out there. One that you like calling and reaching out to more often than not. Who are the people you look forward to meeting? The young men and women who are making the difference. What do you look for when you're trying to identify the next successful influencer?
Yeah, it's people who have good persuasion skills, they look good, they sound good, they have a heart for change, and they take their profession very seriously.
Those that have the ability, I suppose, to see something through from the beginning, which is something that you adopted all those years ago. Looking back now on that time, were the things that you would have done any differently?
I'm actually quite comfortable with the previous decisions I made. I think some of the biggest mistakes that I made was caring too much about what other people thought of me and making a lot of poor relationship choices as well. But at the end of the day, I really own what I've done because ultimately it all worked out and I won in the end.
What about your parents? How they view what Eddie Zia has done with his last 20 years?
I think recently they're very impressed with what I've done, but they were very displeased with my stumbling, especially after the military days. So We weren't talking for a while, right? We're quite estranged for a while. These days they think I'm wonderful, which is great.
It could well be your wife that's making the difference. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. But for a long time we were quite estranged. They were not impressed with what I was doing. Absolutely not.
Look, I grew up in a couple of generations before yours, and I know what that journey can be like. And I can also remember the days when we had so many doubts. And I'm sure you've touched on some of those very early days for you. But as I see and look at you now, at the end of the day, it's all about the decisions we've made, the challenges we took up, and the fact that we had the commitment that allowed us to see it through. That's made the difference. And that probably is the best advice you can give to your influencers of tomorrow.
Absolutely.
What's the advice? If we can leave them with one word or with a sentence or two, what would you say?
Don't worry about what anyone thinks. Go for it in your own unique way.
Edward Zia on The Informer.